What would it be like to go back to the 1990s? Wouldn't it be cool to walk into an arcade and play a bit of Ridge Racer, albeit badly? And after that, how would it feel to drop down into a box-fresh Mazda RX-7 with thoughts of Initial D and Daikoku dancing in your mind at midnight? Well, we've got the answer with this amazing time warp of an FD. Oh, and we've also found something else that was born in the 90s. If this film oils your rotor tips, then please think about joining the Hagerty Drivers Club. You get a magazine that's award-winning and 24/7 roadside assistance. To discover all the benefits, just click on the link in the description down below. This is a very rare car. Not quite a unicorn, but pretty close. It is, of course, a Mazda RX-7 FD 3rd generation. And RX-7 stands for Rotary Export 7, and this car was indeed exported to the UK, but in vanishingly small numbers. Just 210 were sold through official Mazda dealerships, and this is one of them. What makes it, well, even rarer is that this is totally stock as it came out of the showroom, and that has to be pretty rare for an RX-7. Sold in Mazda's Tunbridge Wells dealership on the 14th of May 1993, this car has just 27,000 miles on the clock. It's a proper time warp, and the standard spec for these official UK cars was a little bit curious. It's a mixture of the more luxurious, with things like cruise control and a sunroof, and the more sporting, because this got the firmer R suspension and also lax rear seats, which has got these cubby holes back here. Not that those seats would have been particularly big anyway. In fact, the entire cabin feels pretty snug. I did look up the average height in Japan, and it's 5'7" for a man and 5'2" for a woman, and I'm definitely not that. It feels, well, this wheel sits quite sort of low down in my lap. These seats are pretty comfy though, with lots of nice lumber and covered in leather. Elsewhere, well, it's pretty much a sea of black plastic that tends to squeak quite a lot. There are touches that I suppose are meant to add elegance, like these chrome rings, but sort of fail in that endeavour. However, I do think all these switches have a certain tactility to them. Don't laugh, try that. It's lovely, and I think in some ways there's nothing better than a Japanese 90s indicator stalk. So positive. Perhaps that's just me. I also have a very personal fondness for the colour of this particular RX-7. It's Montego blue, which actually looks green in some lights, and it's almost identical to the hue of my first proper mountain bike, also purchased in the mid-90s. Anyway, regardless of the colour, it is a stunning piece of design that actually came from Mazda's California design studio. With that flowing but tight, athletic fit bodywork, it looks dynamic just sitting still. But what's it like to drive? I've always been really intrigued about the RX-7 because it's a car that I've spent very little time behind the wheel of, and the first things you notice are just how well balanced it feels. It makes sense when you look at the tyres actually, because it's 225 50 R16s all round, so the contact patch is obviously balanced, and then you see how far back that engine is set, and it makes sense, but it just feels really well resolved. It rides the bumps beautifully, it flows down a road really nicely, and again, that's perhaps not a surprise because you've got aluminium double wishbones all round, the dream in a way. It also helps that its weight is relatively svelte at around 1,300 kilos or just under 3,000 pounds. There is a little more lean than I was expecting, and to me it felt like the setup needed just a bit more support at the rear to give you more confidence at the limit, more of a defined edge to play with when you get the LSD locking. But overall, it does feel impressive. Through the bends, it's not dirty, it just settles. You just work with that suspension and it flows nicely. And it will sort of move around, but in a really sort of fluid way. The brakes are really reassuringly strong in this as well. Just helps you get into the driving experience more. The gear shift is obviously really nice as well, being a Mazda gear shift. There's a little sort of pause as you go across neutral, but the engagement of each gear is really nice. It's just a bit more long-winded than something like an MX-5, I think, though.
And what is the 5-speed box connected to? It is, of course, the legendary 13B REW Wankel rotary engine. Twin rotors, 1.3 litres, the thirst of a sailor returning to shore, and sequential turbos like a Porsche 959.
It's both fascinating and frustrating because the rotary engine has so much promise. I know it has its problems, and they're very well documented, but there's a reason why so many manufacturers took on the patent for a Wankel rotary and tried to make it work. It was only really Mazda that succeeded, but the physical properties of it is small, it's lightweight, it has fewer moving parts than a piston engine. These are things that we really should treasure. So why isn't it still here? It seems to me a bit like supersonic passenger air travel. It's one of those things that we keep getting promised it will return. It didn't die with Concorde. Similarly, the rotary engine, it didn't die here, but it's sort of been downhill ever since with the RX-8, wasn't as good. Then we had the 16X engine, just a concept, and now we do have a rotary engine, the 8C, in the MX-30, but it's just a generator. It doesn't power the wheels in any way. It is a tantalising prospect.
The power outputs for factory RX-7s ranged up to 276 bhp, but this UK spec delivers 237 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 218 pounds-feet of torque at 5,000 RPM.
Just the merest hint of a hesitation, and I've heard that in the more powerful cars this could be a little unsettling, but in this, not a bit of it. It doesn't make the slightest bit of sort of difference in terms of even if you're midway through a corner and it kicks in with that second turbocharger. The other thing I've really noticed is just how drivable this feels low down. In fact, it feels relatively sort of torquey, and that comes, I think, from my expectations born out of driving RX-8s, which are really the only sort of exposure I've had to rotary engines, and that was of course naturally aspirated and less powerful than this. This feels like, well, just much better, to be honest. This feels like the high point for rotary engines, and it was downhill after this. This really does feel pretty quick as well. Certainly the 0-60 of 5.1 that they claim, yeah, feels good for that.
It's a fascinating and enjoyable car from an engineering and dynamic perspective, but of course so much of the appeal of an RX-7 also comes from its cultural significance. Initial D, Ridge Racer, Fast and Furious, the Daikoku parking area. The JDM scene is endlessly fascinating, but wherever in the world you encounter it, I always envisage it at night. There can be few churches broader or more evangelical than the JDM scene, as you can see from this midweek gathering at Caffeine and Machine. It's just intoxicating. There is now a factory restoration program selling new parts for FD RX-7s, so it should be easier to keep a car stock like this if you wanted. But it's no surprise that people tinker and modify, sometimes to release extra potential, sometimes to mitigate reliability issues, and sometimes just to express individuality, and the results can be spectacular. Liberty Walk, like the FD RX-7, emerged in Japan in the mid-90s. It's based in Nagoya, west of Tokyo, but the brand is now global, and this one has made it to Europe. I, perhaps surprisingly, have been a fan of Kato-san's Liberty Walk creations pretty much since I first saw one. Don't ask me to explain why, because I'm not entirely sure I can. I wasn't a Max Power boy growing up, but I just think they're amazing. And this RX-7 that screams Porsche 935, well, has to be one of my absolute favourites. This body kit would set you back £25,000 before you'd even fitted it. Then there is the S20 engine swap, the fuel tank, the air ride, the wheels.
It's all about as far from our original RX-7 as you can get. As such, plenty of people will wince and see it as sacrilege, purity poisoned. But to understand the appeal of this, I think you need to be open to the fantasy element of Liberty Walk. Its exaggeration is escapism from the norm. Being in its amplified aura is a fleeting release from real life, just like an arcade game.